And the meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm grateful to now know God, rather than just believing in Him as I once did. Thanks to the clear and consistent teaching of Christian Science in this church, which I feel bringing me closer to Him each day. In my daily work, I'm met with a variety of issues, which I'm required to de-escalate and help to resolve. I'm often challenged to handle problems with upset and often aggressive customers, field partners, and associates. And I'm finding that no matter how severe the situation seems, I can always take a brief moment to call on God for help mentally, and the situation is always stilled as a result. What's most helpful is my increased ability to impersonalize each problem and to see past any aggression, even when it seems to be directed towards me. With this, I'm better able to hear God's direction while feeling His undeniable protection for everyone involved. I'm grateful to know that it's the love of God which takes care of everyone and everything, and I can never be anywhere where this love is not. Thank you so much, Gary, for tonight's reading. And Bruce, thank you for the article recommendation. Again, I'm so grateful for all the loving and healing work that's going on in this church each and every day. It's changing my life, and I am so grateful. Thank you for all the testimonies to come tonight.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. My husband and I are a lot thumbs when it comes to computers. Recently, I uninstalled an iPad app and couldn't reinstall it because the latest version was not compatible with the old iPad. Long story short, we bought a new iPad, but lost many hours of work, apparently irretrievably, except that the practitioner I've been working with said that nothing can be lost. Over a couple of weeks, we sought off and on for an answer on the internet and even chatted online briefly with an expert. In the wee small hours Saturday morning, a new question to pose online came to me, and there was the perfect, simple answer, step by step. One of the funny things about that is that I've tried to find that site again and couldn't find it. But to me, two lessons stood out immediately. One, to persist, and two, to be sure you're asking the right question, including of God. I'm grateful to God for the wonderful resolution and to the Plainfield practitioner for ongoing support. And thank you all.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you very much for those wonderful readings on love. It's something that really has been something I've been working on, and it really struck a chord for me, especially here at this Christmas time. And I'm so grateful for all the classes and teaching that is done here at this Plainfield Church. I'm extremely grateful for the crescendo of new things that have been brought to my attention over the recent months about our precious leader, Mary Baker Eddy. The recent discussions about the metaphysical workers in Mrs. Eddy's home brings back thoughts I had in the past on how I would have fared if asked for such a position, to take such a position. Probably would have been taken right back to the train station very quickly. Now I'm finally realizing that Mrs. Eddy is as close as I allow her to be. I read from her writings every day, after all. It finally sunk in that while I go about my daily drudgery, why am I not trying to do it all through demonstration as Mrs. Eddy would have required? This has finally made me more consistent on relying upon God rather than habit to get my work done. And at the end of the day, what does more for the world? Having fun mindlessly teaching skiing or demonstrating a day of household chores? Mrs. Eddy answered that one. One example was all day the wood stove kept going out. I'm not particularly fond of that method of heating a part of the house. Late in the evening, after it once more refused to burn, it finally hit that I hadn't applied Christian Science to the situation. I decided that instead of going through relighting with kindling with difficulty as I had all day, why not pray and let God bring the fire back to life? It took a little while, but finally the coals became a beautiful fire, which didn't go out at all that night. In the morning, I not randomly, opened up Science and Health to page 259 and read the following appropriate sentence that summed things up. Quote, mortal ideas, pure, perfect, and enduring, are transmitted by the divine mind through divine science, which corrects error with truth and demands spiritual thoughts, divine concepts, to the end they may produce harmonious results. Unquote. I'm so grateful for God for giving us Christian Science through its discoverer and founder, Mary Baker Eddy, who followed and illuminated Christ Jesus' doctrines, and the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent for the harmonious results I am receiving. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Last week, in the midst of a phone call with my practitioner, she gave me the following quote from Body First Article on page 59 of Addresses by Martha Wilcox. Quote, do not fear anything that your present body seems to be doing. Every cell, fiber, tissue, gland, organ, or muscle of the human body exists right now in the one mind as idea. And each idea is proclaiming, I am reflecting God, I am expressing God. Every cell and fiber of my being is expressing the sovereignty of God, or proclaiming, I am, end quote. Once the call was ended, I looked up that quote and wondered what blessing was to be gained from it. Then I realized that my wrist had been hurting all morning, and I had ignored it instead of handling it. So I reread that quote and the text around it, as well as following some citations Mrs. Wilcox gave to Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. And then after all this, I remembered Mrs. Eddy's words on page 385 of Science and Health. Quote, whatever it is your duty to do, you can do without harm to yourself, end quote. I then realized my wrist was completely healed. I was able to move it around without any bit of pain. In thinking more about it, I realized there was a human belief of repetitive stress and such things that are supposed to accompany the type of work I do. My practitioner has told me that it doesn't matter if I believe it. What matters is the belief is out there and I must handle it. This has really brought home what was read during this past weekend's Bible study from the Dixon letter. Quote, there is no protection and no virtue in ignorance of evil and its phases, end quote. I'm so grateful for this healing and this wake-up call. I've been working to be more aware of what beliefs are out there and to actively handle them with the truth of Christian Science. I'm so grateful for this church and regular practitioner support. Thank you.
Thank you. Chardell.
Good evening, and thank you for the readings on love is a mighty spiritual force. They're absolutely wonderful. And also our beautiful music. Tonight, I would like to offer my gratitude for our Plainfield Church Independent and all the teaching that is done here, along with practitioner help. I had an experience with a leaky roof that caused me to really use what I am learning, and I asked my practitioner for prayer. Christian Science is real life being applied to every human need, just as Mrs. Eddy's told us. When I got concerned about the cost of the repair, I turned to supply. God giving all supply, not just some supply. I had to keep sticking to this because the leak would come and go, and I had tried several times to get help with it. God perfecteth everything that concerneth me. Did I believe this? Yes. Wait patiently on God. Okay, do it. The result of God's constant love is a leak that was fixed by an Amish roofer who caulked a small area and wasn't even going to charge anything, but my daughter gave him a payment to show our gratitude. I found a scrap of paper some time ago where I had found written, "Steps to faith, be as a child, purify, and practice what you already possess." Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the beautiful music and for the readings tonight. I'm very grateful for all that I'm learning from my practitioner here at Plainfield on praying correctly for myself, home, neighborhood, nation, and world. A while ago, a neighbor was exhibiting unusual signs of agitation. When I would see this, I would pray. Months later, I heard a very loud commotion outside. I actually even considered calling the police, but before I even had a chance, 4 police cars arrived that were involving this neighbor. Then they did end up, it was solved peacefully, or resolved, whatever it was, and then the police did come a couple more times the next week or two. And I had mentioned this to my practitioner, and she was working with me and instructing me. And during this time, this experience taught me even in prayer, a greater sense of vigilance, firmness, being specific and all-inclusive, and proactively praying. So there was no room for any ungodlike atmosphere, but only for God's activity, protection, for His creation, order, and goodness. And that we don't need to tolerate or be victims, but can face these things with the science of Christ and take a stand for what's right with God. Not long after working with this practitioner, the neighbor's yard, they cleaned it up. There was a couple of guys that lived there. They cleaned it up, planted flowers. They even put a cute little scarecrow out there. I used to love looking at it. It was just so amazing to me to walk by every time, because this went on for years. This yard was a mess. And for them, it just turned around. And that wasn't even the prayer, but that just was showing the power of God. And it just such joy to see these. In fact, they had a prettier little part around the mailbox than half the neighborhood. So that was pretty awesome. And then there just was a calm there, and I have never seen any of that agitation or some of the inappropriate pacing and stuff that was going on. All that diminished, and I see them, there's a calmer sense there. And so I'm so grateful for what I learned from this in learning to pray and the effect of prayer for our world. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Lil.
Thank you for the wonderful readings and the beautiful music. I'm very grateful for a great working out with God and practitioner help of a repair to my car. I accidentally put a dent in the back of my car, which is a leased car. I asked my brother if he could possibly fix it instead of asking the dealer, as he's an expert auto body repairer as well as a builder and customizer of cars. He agreed. He said the dealer probably would have the full panel replaced, as repairing newer cars like mine, not made of metal, is the way it is now done, and that is more costly. He was able to repair and paint the damage and you'd never know anything happened. Perfect, just perfect. He didn't want to be paid, but I insisted on it. I thank practitioner and my loving God for this great working out. I'm just so grateful.
Thank you. Gary.
There's a statement in our textbook, Science and Health, which quickly became a favorite of mine many years ago, which reads, "Final deliverance from error is not reached through paths of flowers." As a youth, I attended several Boston-affiliated Sunday schools, Christian Science Sunday schools, and learned very early that God cares for us. But by the time I attended this church as a young adult, I thought that the primary purpose of Christian Science was to enable us to live a life without problems, or, in other words, to live a path of flowers. And when I first came to this church, I had some wonderful healings of health issues, business issues, family problems, with a practitioner who was a real good one. I knew I had found the right practice of Christian Science when I found this church. But in the back of my mind, there was always this nagging question: why did I have these problems in the first place? I thought a good Christian Scientist was not supposed to have problems. Well, the teacher then in this church, Mrs. Evans, provided me with the answer. And I'm so grateful that she did. She taught me that the primary purpose of Christian Science is not to make our lives problem-free, but rather to destroy the beliefs of sickness and sin for all mankind. And through our prayers and our good living, to free us all to be what God made, perfect in His image. And if a problem comes to us, well, it's a stepping stone in our spiritual growth. It's to strengthen our understanding that God heals. In our textbook, Mrs. Eddy says that trials are proofs of God's care. And I learned that facing and overcoming problems each day is not something to be avoided, but rather is an essential part of our spiritual growth. In fact, we really can't grow without it. Well, once this revelation sank in, and it took a while, but once it sank in, it made a huge difference in my life. I stopped condemning myself, stopped getting annoyed for experiencing problems, and I thank God for the help of that teacher and the practitioners in our church, which is always available. And I thank Mrs. Eddy for faithfully giving us this clear and complete explanation of what life is really all about. So good to be here tonight.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
I'm so grateful for getting a deeper understanding of Christian Science coming to Plainfield. The Bible study and roundtables are very enlightening, and I'm so grateful for my practitioner. Recently, I felt God's ongoing protection. I was preparing to go to bed when I had this urge to check things in the kitchen. To my surprise, I realized that one of the burners on the stove was not completely turned off. There was no flame, but the smell of gas was evident. I immediately turned the burner off and expressed a prayer of gratitude to God. I'm so grateful for this and for all the good God has continued to bring into my life. Thank you for tonight's reading, and I am so very happy to be here this evening.
Thank you. Benjamin.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and so happy to hear the reading right tonight. I love what I'm learning here, what I've been taught here, that no matter what's happening, you shouldn't follow the crowd. The crowd could be anything. It could be thoughts, and sometimes it could be superficial too. Yesterday, I have some work to do, and which I have to go to the motor vehicle. We all know how always when you go to motor vehicle, it's always time consuming. But I have structured my time, I set it up, and I knew when I wanted to go in there and when I have to leave, so that I can get other things done. And I took some people with me, and we went there, and I saw everybody were coming out, and I thought something was wrong. Then we asked them, they said their system has went down, and it's been down for hours, so they're not accepting any paperwork because the system, their POS, wasn't working. And the people that came with me thought, okay, maybe we should go back and come back the next day. Well, I don't have the next day. Now is the time. And I came for this. I wasn't going to accept it. Because I have been taught here that mind controls every situation. And that mind is God. Whatever the situation is, if you understand this principle, it makes things, almost everything possible, no matter what it is, really. And I told them we will have this thing done. Then we went in where other people were going out, we were going in. And I went in there to verify. They told us the same thing. Do we want to wait? I said, okay, we can wait. And we sat down there, we filled out all our documents, met every requirement that were required from us. And we sat down there. Within 5 minutes, the system came back up. We were supposed to be last on the lineup. Here we are, we're on the first in line. And everything was processed right in time. And we had opportunity to do everything that we wanted to do and leave at the right time. Mine took care of it, which is God, because I understood that nothing was going on but good. System cannot break down when God is in control. That's what I've been taught here. I'm so grateful for this teaching. And another one to add to that was the system that I use here to do the work for the church. I've been using it for all the time I've been here, and it's been working perfectly for me, and I love it. But it's been outdated for years, but I still love it. It's the best system I can have. I know there are other things out there, but I love what I have. But recently, it just stopped working. And I spoke with Jeremy, who takes care of our technical work, and he has so much he's doing, especially now. I was hesitant to put more burden on him, especially this time. And I pray on that, And I know I love this system. I don't want anything else, especially now. So we talked about maybe later in the future we'll find something else to replace it. And last weekend, I went back to say, okay, let me try this system, see if it will respond. And here it is again, started working. Not just working, started working better than it's ever worked for years. I mean, it looks like I just bought a new plug in. And it go back again to what I said earlier about God taking control of his operation. It's not really us, it's God taking care of everything. When you put everything in his care, he takes care of it. Because mind alone controls every situation. I'm so grateful for this teaching that I'm learning here. And everything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. I've been experiencing pain in my feet, my toes. But this past weekend, the pain was so intense. 2 nights in a row, it was hard to get to sleep, even though I applied an ice pack. I spoke to my practitioner about it, and she suggested the article on Body by Martha Wilcox, which Jeremy mentioned. Every cell, fiber, tissue, gland, organ, or muscle of the human body exists right now in the one mind as idea. And it's proclaiming, I am reflecting God. I'm expressing God. I worked with that the following night. And I was completely able to overcome the belief of pain. So I went to sleep easily without any problem and actually slept better than I have in years. And the same thing has occurred the second night. I'm very grateful to my Plainfield practitioner for her ever-available help. And I'm so grateful for Christian Science and to Mrs. Eddy for all the work she did to give us this science. And I'm so grateful to be a member of this independent Christian Science church. And thank you for the beautiful readings on love tonight. Love is indeed a mighty spiritual force.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful readings on love tonight. I am so grateful that we've been taught to keep awake at this holy time and watch out for the deceptive, baseless thoughts that come to try to pull us down. I am so grateful for Edward Kimball and all the other really devoted workers who left us so much to help us along our way. In his book, the copy printed here at this church, Teachings and Addresses, on page 378, there's a very short but a very reassuring paragraph which should give anyone who is doubting God some hope. He says, the God we worship is good, and he is able, willing, and ready to redeem mankind from the evils imposed upon them by an utterly perverted sense of existence. This is so hopeful for me. I think it should encourage everybody. And also, let's not forget, Mrs. Eddy tells us in that, actually it's in one of our hymnals, 144, he says it is sense that would deceive. So when we're feeling doubtful, let's remember God's glory, his presence now, his laws that govern us. Let us stay awake, be grateful, and give glory to our King. So grateful to be here tonight and for all the testimonies that continually prove that, yes, our God is good and he is here and he loves us all.
Thank you. Mary.
I have a letter to read from England. Particularly wanted to thank you all for the clear teachings recently about Mrs. Eddy's place, as the woman mentioned in Revelation. I've only received very woolly answers on this point in the past, so thank you so much. I also like the watching point I read about within one of the articles, which Mrs. Eddy gave to one of her workers, stating that she was Christ Mary, which makes her position so clear. I feel I'm getting a better appreciation for her as I read and listen to your roundtables and Bible studies. The more I read about how the writings of the early workers have been buried, the more astonished I am. It's very difficult to understand why this happened, and even more why this has continued to the point that Mrs. Eddy and even Christian Science is barely known about now. Perhaps this is not true in America, but it certainly is in England. There must be many sincere Christian scientists who do not know about this situation. In the light of this, thank you all so much for you and your church and all you are doing to acquire and to publish this early material. With much gratitude. And then from our website bulletin board from Pennsylvania, a quote from Gilbert Carpenter, Mary Baker Eddy, Your Spiritual Precepts, Volume 4. Any testimony that is filled with the Spirit is impressive and carries healing. In fact, should a Wednesday evening meeting be held in which the students worked faithfully and rightly for that hour, if it was filled with the Spirit, it would heal the sick and thus bear fruit, even though the testimonies were few. The burden of mesmerism would lift, and this would satisfy the strangers thereafter, and they would attend gladly. End of the quote. This seems a helpful perspective to me. I have begun composing a testimony for next week, though. I'm grateful here we have these wonderful books by Carpenter and others that teach us these things, and that in our church we do know the importance of a spiritual atmosphere for all our services, for everything that we do. And it's certainly why we have our Tuesday night watch or Saturday night watch, to prepare that atmosphere so that all who come feel it, feel the Christ presence, and are blessed and healed. Thank you so much for the readings tonight on love being a mighty spiritual force. I have that quote framed on my desk. In Miscellany you read tonight, where Mrs. Eddy says, "Remember, thou canst be brought into no condition, be it ever so severe, where love has not been before thee, and where its tender lesson is not awaiting thee. Therefore despair not nor murmur, for that which seeketh to save, to heal, and to deliver will guide thee, if thou seekest this guidance." Many years ago, a practitioner in this church gave me that statement. It's so filled with comfort and love. And at that time, I was quite despairing over probably very many things. My health certainly wasn't good. I was sick a lot of the time. I was depressed and anxious. I had marital problems and other relationship problems. And I was so comforted by that statement. And one thing that I realized in working with it and reading it, she makes a point of saying that help is there if thou seekest this guidance. And I realized in my prayers and in my work, I often had a very superficial way of asking for help. And I realized then that I needed to seek God with my whole heart, mind, and soul. It says in the Bible, and God says in the Bible, when you seek me with your whole heart, mind, and soul, I will be found of thee. And all our problems, whatever they are, it's always a lack of understanding about God. And so if we seek that more than anything else, and we learn to realize what a wonderful God we have, and that He is there for us always to save us, to bring us out of any trouble. As we get this understanding, our false beliefs, whatever those false beliefs are, physical or financial, emotional, they will drop away, and we will truly find ourselves as the image and likeness of God. It's an ongoing process, but it's a wonderful process. And as Gary's testimony said so well, that our problems are times in which we can get closer to God. That's the whole purpose of it. We wouldn't be having the problem if there wasn't something more we needed to know and learn about God. And once we do, the problem fades away into its native nothingness. So I'm so grateful for that quote, and it did help me. I was healed of all of those problems I was mentioning. They faded away into their native nothingness as I sought God with my whole heart, mind, and soul. I'm so grateful for our meeting tonight, the beautiful music, the lovely Christmas music that we heard as a prelude, the hymns, the readings, the testimonies. So great to be with you all tonight.
Thank you.